Good evening, spiritual warriors. Welcome to Spiritual Warriorship. This is Mother Indrani, and here we're reading from books and hearing from Bhaktitirtha Swami. And he has many books, as I've said before, and I'm hoping and praying some of you, most of you, either have them in your library and can follow along with us, or you're planning to get. And you can get them at krishna.com or harinamapress.org. I apologize for not being here last week if you came looking for me, but I was a little under the weather, and rather than make you look at something that wasn't too pleasant to see, I took some time. But I'm thankful the Lord has spared me a week more, and prayerfully you're all out there and ready to move ahead. We are still in Spiritual Warrior 3, Solace for the Heart in Difficult Times. And we're on, and I'm looking like ready to complete tonight, Chapter 9, Guidelines for Responsible Action. As I said, usually when I give the title and where we're going to go tonight, I still haven't completely detached from wishing I had a live audience and I could do a quick review and point out or ask a question and see a hand go up. But I'm working on that complete detachment because this is the situation that the Lord has arranged for us. So I pray you all are hearing, finding something that you can use in a practical way in your life and grow spiritually from it. In fact, in the beginning of this chapter, because the title again is Guidelines for Responsible Action, and he reminds us that we're always acting. The mind is active, the soul is active. But he reminded us, what I like in the next section, where remember when Arjuna didn't want to go on the battlefield and fight? In fact, he was saying he would take a beggar bowl and go begging or sit under a tree or something, and Krishna admonished him and reminded him that we should all devote our lives and activity, all activity, to the development of our spiritual life instead of trying to avoid activities. Sometimes it's easier, doesn't it, to try to avoid, but we're not. If we do that or attempt to do that, we really don't feel good about it, and we're not happy because we are active beings. So we must really try to use our time and devote it to activities for our spiritual life. And I hope you all have been thinking about what your spiritual life means to you, how important it is to you, and the things that you're doing. Let's say what actions you're taking to improve on yours and to help others in their spiritual life, which remembering the section we went, which I felt quite strongly about. Remember, I believe I read it twice to you and have been really working at it in my own consciousness, the section on helping and serving, the difference between serving, helping, and fixing. And one thing he says, we can't fix anybody because they're not broken. And we have to be careful when we say we're helping, because we may start thinking, well, I'm better than them, so I'll help them. But the proper attitude is service. How can I serve you? And that's what I'm watching with my own mindset, or talking now, or asking. As I'm thinking about, can I help? I've been switching the help to serve. How can I serve you? it makes a difference. It really makes a difference, and I think you get a different um, response because it probably is unconscious, if you will, as Bhakti Tirtha Swami brought out, that we may feel that helping means then you owe me something, you got to pay me back, or I'm better than you. So I'm finding reading, hearing is very important, and then applying. Okay? So what we're going to do tonight, remember that we ended with going through the different powers, but I'm not going to review that because I want to work towards completing this chapter, and hopefully you will have received some guidelines for responsible action. But tonight we're going to begin looking at how acting spiritual warriors, revolutionaries. And first he reminds us that every bona fide prophet who has brought any important changes in the mainstream of society has been a revolutionary. And not just a revolutionary spiritual warrior. Spiritual warrior. Because we used weapons, as we said way back in the beginning and many times, not ordinary weapons, but the weapons of love, compassion, tolerance, and caring for others. So he's telling us about the existence of prophets who dedicated their life to annihilating oppression and injustice. Now, from the sense of being a revolutionary means going against the grain, and being spiritual also means standing out and thinking independently. It stands to reason that if we are spiritual, we are naturally revolutionary. What do you think of that? And excuse me for looking, it just seems like this book is a little too low. 1 second. Let's put it up. Okay. Okay, would you agree with that? Now, it also follows that as spiritual warriors, we must be revolutionaries. How about that? Because what are revolutionaries? Usually their purpose is to bring about some change, if it's social or whatever. Now, to be effective as revolutionaries, we must draw upon powers much higher than ourselves. And if you've been listening regularly, prayerfully you've gotten that message that I think Jesus said, I of myself can do nothing, it's the Father within. And we've been talking about depending on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he tells us that we must draw upon powers within us as long as we're revolutionary. Now, those who attempt to be either spiritual or revolutionary, but not both, are simply dabbling reformists who can have no major impact. Now he tells us about some people in history. Remember, we've been through them before. But it's really great to be reminded that if we examine history, we discover a great number of spiritual revolutionaries who paid a high price for their truthfulness. One example was Zoroaster, a Persian mystic who was stabbed to death because he tried to engage in consciousness rising. Another was Socrates. And he was put to death. Why? Because he was trying to help the young people to engage in consciousness, right? And they felt that he poisoned the minds of these young people, so he was poisoned. Buddha was stoned and harassed, huh? The Prophet Muhammad, his life was threatened by assassination many times. Jesus was crucified. Saint Teresa of Avila, she was a nun, and she had to run away from her home so she could practice her life of simplicity and renunciation. The founder and leader of the Baha'i faith, he was threatened. St. Thomas of Aquinas, a celibate monk, his family locked him in a room with a prostitute to try to get him to break his vows. St. Francis of Assisi, he gave away all his possessions and rejected his parents in public to pursue his vocation. And in India, the assassination attempts on Ramacharya and Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta Swami. So the list can go on. But what we're seeing, these are all spiritually orientated people. So as we've said before, the spiritual path, or even as he tells us, this path of the spiritual warrior, is not an easy one. But it's a mission. But it takes courage and determination. So we looked at that in many cases, although it appeared that these people suffered needlessly, sometimes when you stand back and just look, but you need to know the essence, they actually made a conscious choice to achieve a purpose. A conscious choice to achieve a purpose. And from another higher perspective, since they were totally surrendered to the divine will, how could they have done otherwise? You're surrendered to the divine will. You know you're protected. You know he's not going to give you more than you can bear. And you stay fixed on and focused on that which you set out to do. So he tells us that how can someone afraid of death teach us that we're not our bodies? How can teachers urge us to know we're external? We're eternal. We're eternal beings. So how can someone urge us to know that we're eternal if they fear death themselves? How can teachers exhort us to give up all the attachments if they cling to anything? Paradoxically, though, their renunciation and martyrdom, through it, they have attained immortality. So just look at today's world, huh? One sure sign of our potency as spiritual warriors is the strength of the reaction we provoke from the negative forces. Have you ever been in a group sometime and you're teaching, preaching, talking, about spiritual concepts, spiritual ideas, and expressing your spirituality by just being who you are, a spiritual warrior. And you'll see some people get very agitated, very agitated. And that's what he's talking about. He says, if as agents of light surrender to negative influences, we do not stir up things, then our light is not very bright. Okay, spiritual warrior? I think again something phrase from the Bible, let your light so shine. Yeah, spiritual warriors, that's what we are, bright lights. When we shine a torch into the darkness, it should devour the darkness and cut a path for others. Then we are fulfilling our roles as spiritual revolutionaries. Now, right now, all around the world, our religious and educational institutions are under siege, and we must take notice. For example, certain evangelists are among the most powerful mind programmers in existence, he says. We have to start taking control back by kicking out corrupt leaders, just as Jesus kicked against the money changers in the temple. He speaks about that incident. Jesus went directly to places of worship because the corruption of these spiritual places was causing great degradation in society at large. Now, relatively speaking, it is not so bad when complications are of a political, social, or economic nature, because these difficulties are to be expected. They arise out of materialism. However, when the spiritual foundations of society begin to decay, people's hearts become devastated, because spirituality is supposed to be the most uplifting and unifying experience that gives meaning to existence. So what did Jesus do? He started knocking heads and turning over tables. The truth is revolutionary. His actions made an impact at that particular time. Now, of course, the author states that we're not asking you to start running over tables and church pews and breaking temple windows. You could spend your whole life doing that and still not make a dent. There are too many iniquitous situations to deal with. We do not always need physical or material force to make a difference. Okay? So that's a good reminder of, if you feel yourself getting ready, I'm going to crack heads in here, there's another way. What we're requesting, the author says, from you is something more effective than physical and material force. use the sacred and divine powers of righteousness, love, piety, and chastity to affect the collective consciousness. Remember, we read through those powers. I'm not going to do them again, but we could look at, what did he mention? Divine, sacred and divine powers. He gave us a little on that, remember? Sacred power results from following standardized formulas and bona fide systems, teachers and prophets. This is sacred power. As people engage in austerity and selfless service, they naturally develop empowerment in harmony with the laws of the universe. They open themselves up to inspiration from higher realms. When directed properly, sacred power can propel them towards transcendence and divine power. Now, what is divine power? Anybody remember from that class? Ooh, all the hands are up. Divine power is the greatest of all because it contains the highest adoration and appreciation for the source of all power. Divine power comes to those who realize that they must emulate the lives of the most advanced saints, showing mercy, tolerance, full surrender, and love for all of God's creation. Divine power manifests when we become humble enough to fully offer ourselves to God and to be used like puppets. That's just the divine power within. And you can have it, and you have it. You just have to bring forth the qualities. We have reached the highest level of spiritual attainment at this point when we totally surrender all personal agendas and desires. Then the direct energy of the Lord can enter so that we begin to act in accordance with what He, the Lord, wants to accomplish through us. The words were spoken as I repeated earlier. It's not me who doeth the work, but the Father within. So He tells us our work is then done as if God is doing it Himself. Okay? In Vedic terminology, such empowered individuals are called Avesha avatars. And this divine power, known as Devya, is considered infinitely superior. Okay? So it's this divine empowerment that every spiritual warrior lives for. Okay? Now, where were we? So, he reminds us that the use of that sacred and divine power of righteousness, love, piety, and chastity, and you're to use that to affect the collective consciousness. And these natural qualities are disarming and heart-melting. They penetrate to the core of one's heart and can bring about genuine healing. We're almost done. Before we move on, any questions? Any comments? How many out there?
3 right now.
Okay, can I hear the name?
David, Carol, and Anushka.
Oh, all right. Do I know them? Do you know? I know Carol. Do I know David? Hi, David. And who?
Anushka Patel.
Anushka Patel. Oh, yes. She hasn't been there a while. Well, how can I serve you?
Carol has 2 questions. Or, yeah, 3 questions. Are the individuals who get agitated when someone is expressing their spirituality demonic?
Could be. Because you see, if someone gets agitated hearing about spirituality, it means that they're not there. And they aren't happy with hearing something higher, and they want to change the environment and the energy. I can't say that they're a demon, but I think Bhakti Tirtha Swami calls it negative forces. So that happens. There's some people, their consciousness is so covered, and they're just feel destined to make problems and make trouble, that it's hard to penetrate that. But he's saying that that's what spiritual warriors usually do, because you come with a light and you come to shine the light on that darkness, and it's like a person who doesn't really want the light, they cover their eyes and, want to go out. So I won't say outright, yes, they're a demon, but I do say that there's some negative forces functioning within them if they're agitated by hearing. Now again, it's how it's being presented. He's told us in so many places about compassion, and just here we just got through talking about compassion and love. And it's how you go about. You can't bash spirituality into a person's head. First of all, I've been told by my teacher, we have to be an example of it. If we are spiritual in mind and consciousness, that will definitely express and show through us. And when we offer some solace or some point or principle in a compassionate way, sometimes that can make a change. And then if one becomes agitated, we don't allow that to affect us, because we recognize that behavior is a cry for something else, or they're just not ready to hear. But we don't lose our composure as a spiritual warrior. How's that?
The second question is...
Did that answer help, Carol?
She says thank you.
Oh. And another question?
Yeah. What is the difference between demon and demonic?
Okay. You know what? I feel like saying, let's go to Bhagavad Gita, chapter, what is it, 13? The demonic, and what is that chapter called? You know, Shalka?
Divine and demonic.
Divine and demonic. I'm not sure how to answer that at this moment, Carol. And somehow I have a feeling you have an answer. What do you think is the difference?
She says she doesn't have an answer.
You don't have an answer, okay. Because it's like one is the, one is the object and the other is the subject or the taker of an action. But it's someone who's covered over. Because see, we're all eternal souls. We're all part and parcel of the Supreme God. But if we choose to cover over that and function on the lower level, then we are demonic. Because I was just thinking, in our Srimad Bhagavatam and our Shastra stories, many of those that were called demonic actually were liberated by God Himself. So they have a purpose. But it's, again, how we go about. And if we happen to be in the company of what seems to be a demonic person, and if they're demonic, then they could be called a demon, and we find we're not able to, and that energy is affecting us, it's time then to say Haribo and leave, or ask them to leave if they happen to be in our environment. Because we have to be really strong. And we're just reading about revolutionary spiritual warriors. You have to really be strong in your foundation and stand up to those negative forces out there. And we will provoke them. But we also have to use discernment, as we went through one of the sections, and know when to say, Haribo, you may leave now, and then you ask the Lord to bless them and help them and to give you strength to be able to wipe away that negative force and energy that has come upon you. And then you begin your spiritual disciplines to become a strong spiritual warrior, so that if a so-called demon, demonic person comes in the light from your heart, soul, which is expanding more and more and serving the Lord, will shine a light on that situation. How's that? There's more? No. Anybody out there want to add anything to those or make any comment on those? Where is David? You said there's a David there? Where's David located? Where are you located, David?
David's from Tampa.
Tampa. Okay, welcome.
And Carol's comment is, demonic qualities are in most all of us in varying degrees.
Okay, but if you've been following us through, in fact, that came out when we read Spiritual Warrior 6, that yes, in this age, both qualities are there, but we've been given tools and techniques to begin to peel that away to get to our true constitutional position as an eternal spirit soul. So the ball is in our court to really work on ourselves. If you remember how many times Bhakti Tirtha Swami had said, internal, introspective, okay? Yeah. And the Mr. Patel, and what's his name?
Anushka
Patel. Is he from Canada? Am I remembering that right? Somebody was from Canada.
Manjesh is from Canada.
Okay. He's not? But he was a friend of his.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, okay. Did he say? Okay. Can I move along? We're going to finish this chapter tonight because we're almost done. Thank you. Thank you for being there, and thank you, Carol, for your questions. It shows you're being quite attentive, and you're really endeavoring for change. I hope I've been helpful. And if you have Bhagavad Gita, do go to chapter 13. I'm going to look at it sometime tomorrow and get a real, because demons are quite strongly described there. Okay? Okay. Now, here Bhakti Tirtha Swami is giving us a word of caution. He says a word of caution is in order here. As we use these powers, what powers was that we just spoke out and read about? The divine and sacred powers. In the service, as we use them in the service of healing, we must not be naive. A useful reminder of this point is the biblical account of Jesus riding into Jerusalem on a donkey. The people of the city gave him the red carpet treatment, putting their coats down and placing palm fronds at his feet and calling out joyfully to him with great intensity. The same ones who would later take his life, or at least acquiesce to his crucifixion. So let this serve as a warning. Whenever people give us the red carpet treatment, we would be wise to take a careful look at their ulterior motives. So he's giving us from all sides what we couldn't expect, but what we're to do. He's so fantastic. So he says, today our situation is similar to that of Jesus' time. Some of the world's greatest contemporary conflicts are the result of spiritual confusion and insincerity. One religion is fighting another. One ethnic group is cursing another. And nations are falling apart. Kali Yuga in full swing. It has gotten so extreme that many people are even cursing God. Naturally, the forces of oppression become accelerated when this type of outcome occurs. When we commit to a strong spiritual life and discipline, we are talking about a most revolutionary stance. We are saying that we refuse to be blind fools. We will not be docile and passive, nor will we anesthetize ourselves to avoid noticing that the house is on fire. We are denying the selfishness that turns a blind eye to the misery of others, as long as we have some degree of temporary comfort. So it's coming back again to taking care of each other selflessly and not letting it be I, me situation. Some of us have already experienced harassment because of our genuine desire to combat ignorance. It is widely known that prophets are little represented in their own homes. Therefore, we must be prepared to face intense challenges as we work on our own turf. The spiritual life, again, he told us way back, it's not easy. It takes courage and determination, but it's a mission, again, to serve others and to help others to come out of ignorance. That's why you're on the battlefield. And what's the battlefield? It's consciousness. So that's why we must keep our consciousness clear and pure. And he told us throughout each of these books as we've read how to do that. The Supreme Lord arranges for those who are the closest to us to be our biggest tests, allowing us to clearly see the choices before us, and the Lord arranges them. What do we really want? The spiritual or the material? And that's usually what it really comes down to. Stop. What do you want? The spiritual or the material? Constant challenges will confront us, whether in the form of those most dear to us or other external forces. Now, hopefully, none of us will have to undergo tests as severe as those experienced by many of the world's greatest leaders, teachers. But if we are serious about becoming anti-material and understanding the nature of the soul, we will not escape challenges completely. And I believe if you were with us in, what was that, chapter, I think it was 8, the one before this, how to strengthen ourselves, he started the chapter by reminding us that spiritual life is a challenge. But when you understand and study what the results are, it's all right. And again, you know if you're a spiritual warrior, you're not in that battle by yourself. Not only will the average people of today consider our behavior quite radical, but also we will be serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the most envied person in the world, while living in the abode of his enemies and offenders. For the most part, we will find ourselves surrounded by people totally dedicated to corrupt business as usual. Those of us who are seeking an easy ride will soon discover spiritual environment and spiritual commitments are not for the faint-hearted. But it's for those who find excitement in the spiritual life, enthusiasm in serving and growing and knowing you're serving the Supreme Lord who you are part and parcel of. Now, if we know ahead of time that we will have tests, when they come, we can undergo them with a certain measure of zeal and enthusiasm. And that's what I've said many times makes spiritual life exciting. Because it's not boring by any means. It's not stagnant by any means. Because you're constantly taking action. And this is this guide for responsible action, this chapter, what it was about. And he's been giving the tips, the hints, the technologies. Instead of trying to avoid them, we can understand that they're a part of the experience that will eventually qualify us to go back to God, back to the kingdom of God. These tests allow us to demonstrate a loving commitment to the Lord, even to the point of engaging in warfare for His glorification. Knowing and remembering this should constantly bring solace to our hearts, even in the most difficult times. Are you getting it? It's about knowing. This is the knowledge that we've been going throughout these books. If you're reading Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, to know that tests are inevitable, but it just helps us to work harder in serving the Supreme Lord and helping others. And to know that it's to qualify you for the ultimate goal of this spiritual path, which is love of God. And as Bhakti Tirtha Swami keeps reminding us. Okay, this is the last section. Above all, spiritual warriors are servants of the Lord, engaged in action for the benefit of others. Got that? Spiritual warriors are servants of the Lord, engaged in action for the benefit of others. In the midst of the fray, how do we identify right action? Because this chapter was titled Guidelines for Responsible Action. Several methods are available to weigh and measure the morality and feasibility of action. He tells us one alternative is to imagine that what the results would be if a majority of people performed a similar action. Okay? It is said, we judge a tree by the fruit it bears. Sometimes that is properly aligned will produce beneficial results if the majority of people carry it out. However, when many people indulge in something that is wicked, the resulting misery and contaminations leave many victims. Therefore, as we evaluate a potential action, we can ask ourselves if the action would add to or distract from the progress of human civilization. Taking on now, not just your family in that house, human civilization, if masses of people performed it. That's really expanding your thinking for an action that you're taking in your community, because it will expand if it's for the good, and it will destroy if it's not. If everybody engaged in abortion, what would be the state of society? What would we have a future? If everyone espoused some kind of sectarian religion, would there be any sense of unity with diversity? If everyone thought that they had the one and only answer to the world's problems, would there be any means of communication? If everyone took to chauvinism, racism, nationalism, or tribalism, would we have a viable planet? Clearly, we would not. Most importantly, we should ask ourselves, are my thoughts and my actions pleasing to God? Stop a minute and just consider that. Ask ourselves, ask yourselves, are my thoughts and actions pleasing to God? And of course, God, by the way, is always watching. So it isn't about, well, I'll do this on the side over here, you know. No, he's watching wherever you are. Now, he's summarizing. How do we summarize this wonderful chapter we've just been through? We must evaluate every potential action on this basis. If masses of people did it, would it create a higher good? Would God be pleased? This is how ancient culture functioned. Members of a village would feel too embarrassed to do anything harmful and could not bear the feeling of letting their community down. Nowadays, because of everyone's lackness, the most unsuccessful people are those who get away with being the most dishonest. For example, the drug dealer, frequently they have the best homes and cars. And very often, the most ingenious minds are used to either invent or defend the most deviant and dilabating behavior. So, as spiritual warriors, we must do everything we can to transform this state of consciousness. So, are we on a mission, spiritual warriors? Are you ready to continue? Are you ready to put some of these techniques, technologies, understanding in practice in your life? And that's the end of chapter Guidelines for Responsible Action. So it's going to be an exciting week as I wait for the Divine Lord within to guide me to which adventure chapter we'll go on next week. But what if you can review, if you've been coming fairly regularly, even if tonight's your first night, something that was said in the past hour, hopefully one word, one phrase, one sentence has struck something in your mind and your consciousness that you will feel you would like to implement in your life. Just hearing about those saints and prophets who suffered, but still they became immortal. You can't imitate them, but you can emulate some aspect of them that you may have heard. So does anybody have any comments or questions before we say good night?
David says, nice class. And he made a comment about the divine and demoniac nature. He says, Kali, right is radical. I guess in the age of Kali, right is radical.
Okay. Thank you for your comment, David. Thank you for being there, dear. Any other comments or questions? This is still just for 3 people? Okay. Okay. Well, I think, huh?
Carol says these classes are so valuable and listening to you also. And she says her hand is up.
Your hand is up, Carol. All right. Thank you. Thank you for being there. And we look forward to meeting you again next week. And please, I used to ask if there was any point that you heard that maybe you tried in your week that you could share with us. I, of course, would like to hear it. I'm not asking too many questions. Maybe before we start a new chapter next week, I may ask something from this past chapter. But this was guidelines for responsible action. And I hope you've gotten some guidelines or tips or points that he has brought out. But try to practice something the next week and share with us next week, all right? Thank you all for being there. Krishna bless you. Hare Krishna. Good night. Haribol.